one girl to make the rockin' world go round.
Hello lovelies, I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. Please like, subscribe, and most important of all, share, so that people can discover me and all the wonders that I offer. Hello lovelies, today we're taking a look at the world of Synnibar by CS McCracken, a notorious game. And this is his new edition for it. I got these copies free of the 3 core books to disclose that, and I did a live stream with him over on T-Shirted Historians channel, which you can go and check out. If I remember, I'll add a link to that at the end. Yeah, while I'm declaring my biases, I like the dude. Raven is incredibly personable, charismatic, and extremely enthusiastic about gaming. It's a breath of fresh air in a time of cynicism, constant snark, and political correctness. He really has this massively infectious level of enthusiasm for gaming in general and his game in particular. So I don't want to hurt Raven's feelings because he's such a nice dude, and but at the same time, the integrity of my reviews is extremely important, which is why I declare any biases that I have up front. But I've got to be honest about the content and stuff here, both good and the bad. So, Synnibar has been mentioned in the same breath as things like Fatal in the past. It's one of those notorious games that has entered into internet lore very, very strongly over the years, and it's been a real whipping boy for internet snark over on the Big Purple back in the day and elsewhere online a lot. It's presented like the punchline to a joke by a lot of people for things like flying laser bears and so on. That was kind of out of step with where games have been for quite some time. I think that's a little bit unfair to mention Synnibar in the same breath as Fatal, and Fatal isn't completely irredeemable, as I've written blog posts on in the past, just 95% irredeemable. But to mention this in the same breath as that's one of those notorious games, I just don't feel that it's fair. This isn't a game being deliberately controversial, it's just gonzo, which was massively out of style for a very long time, but has recently kind of come back into style. I think Synnibar maybe could have been more successful if this was the system that it was run under originally. Certainly it feels like Rifts kind of stole Synnibar's lunch in a lot of ways, with its kitchen sink approach to what it put in its game. Synnibar kind of does that, but dialed up to 11 in the same way that Rifts is dialed up to 11 from normal games, I guess. But with the OSR, yeah, Gonzo certainly seems to be back in style to a degree, and so Synnibar sits much more comfortably in a kind of OSR point of view, even if it's got its own system, which is old school in its own right. It's just not a D&D derivative. So it's old school in spirit, if not in form. The setting for Synnibar is a kind of world ship made from a terraformed Mars with an interior sort of hollow Earth as well as an exterior, both of which are inhabited and colonized, so you get double the surface area for your trouble. And it is a mixture, a synthesis, a syncretic setting that mixes magic and technology and a lot of things that you aren't sure which is which, and a lot of mad and crazy ideas, with the idea being that you can effectively set any kind of adventure within the world of Synnibar, play virtually any type of character that you want inside the world of Synnibar, and it will all make at least some kind of internal sense. So that's what you're getting, really. And the whole concept, the whole idea, it's like a sort of fly in amber for the boundless creativity and frankly whack ideas of the early RPGs in the mid to late 70s. You've got elves, dwarves, dragons, cyborgs, warp drives, alien planets, all of that kind of thing, all cross-pollinating and coexisting in a single world, which can travel through space and take you to other worlds, allowing you to introduce other stuff that you might want to, in the same way that Rifts allows for other weirdness to come through the Rifts, or for you to travel randomly all around the world and end up in peculiar places. So yeah, it's open. It's very open. The original Synnibar had a system that people seem to have a lot of trouble deciphering. The system here is much simpler, much more graspable. If anything, it's over-explained to a large degree. But basically what it boils down to is that you take your ability, your skill score, spend a certain amount of effort. So you have set levels of skill competency, stat competency, that sort of thing. Then you can expend effort to boost your chances. Then you roll a D100, total it up, and your total is registered against a target number or an active opposition. And that's really it. You compare your final score to your opposition, and that reflects out in whether you succeed or fail, how effectively you succeed, and so on. Combat is almost like its own subsystem. So you have particular set-apart combat abilities, but it all still works basically the same way. You have your constitution, which is kind of like a battery of energy, and you could cross-pollinate that with other things to represent storehouses of energy, magic items that maybe you could store constitution in, that sort of thing. But you're gated over how much you can spend. So you have a pool of constitution, of effort that you can put into things, and willpower and karma, which kind of work in similar ways. But then it's gated. So while you might have 500 constitution, you can initially only spend 5 at a time. But you can increase that. So that allows for how much effort you can make when doing whatever it is that you're doing. This also allows the game to be played dicelessly, in that you can discard the dice roll aspect and just have effort making up the difference. So if you, as a young, brash adventurer, hale and hearty, full of fitness, went up against an ancient master who relies more on his skill, you could expend effort constantly to overcome his difference in capability, but you would wear yourself out long before he did, and then he could finish you off with a single strike. So that's a nice little way in which the rules can impact play. Now, Raven likes to use different terminology to what you might be used to in other games. That's fine, I guess, but some people might find that a little confusing. Of course, there's nothing to stop you rewriting and using different terms that you find more familiar, but overall, the language is a little bit tortured, and that can act as a little bit of a barrier to understanding. On the flip side, Raven has included a lot of long, slowly spelled out examples, particularly around combat. I think he was stung a bit by the misunderstandings in the earlier editions, and so he's certainly set out to address that, and as a result he has possibly over-explained himself. So I think it would benefit, if you want to play the game, I think you would benefit from going through it with a notebook and making your own notations on what you think the rules mean, and putting it in a more concise fashion, because referencing the rules during play is going to be difficult due to the disorganized nature of the book in a lot of ways, and it's really going to slow down the pace of play, at least until you've internalized the rules and don't need to reference them so much. Though Raven is very much a rules first kind of guy, and wants to use that to establish a kind of fair baseline for everybody, which again kind of goes against modern sensibilities in gaming, which is much more about rulings than rules, but it is very, very old school. It's still more playable than Palladium games, and while the mathematics and so on might intimidate some people, and calculating percentages could put people off, we all have mobile phones with calculators on them now, and there's all kinds of websites that will calculate percentages for you very quickly and easily. So the excuses for being terrified of maths are slimmer and slimmer every day. But as I say, it's still more playable than Palladium, and if you really were intimidated, you could greatly simplify the system by using a D10 instead of a D100 and just knocking a 0 off everything. And that would make it far more easy for people who have difficulty with mathematics. All three books are a kind of vomitous, schizophrenic splurge of breathless ideas and inspiration, and content of all kinds. And the layout is unforgiving, and the walls of text are unforgiving. It does have a kind of breathless enthusiasm, which is inspiring. Raven has a YouTube channel where he explains things about the game, and if you watch and listen over there, that will give you some sense of the enthusiasm that he puts into everything. If there was a motivational speaker for role-playing games, I think Raven would be one of them. I mean, how else can I explain it? It's like someone played Barrier Peaks and then really went for it. For those who don't know, that's an old D&D adventure where you ran into sci-fi elements in the middle of your fantasy game, a crashed UFO, essentially, and robots, laser pistols, and all of that sort of thing. The artwork is patchy. Probably could have done with using some good stock art. Being multi-genre makes that easier. There's plenty of stock art in places like Drive-Thru RPG and so on. I sell a lot of it, incidentally. And being multi-genre, you can pick the cream of the crop from science fiction, fantasy, horror, any other genre you care to mention. But the artwork's mixed, and the print quality doesn't do a lot to doesn't do a lot to show the art that there is to the best advantage. I mean, clearly, I even spent a little bit on the covers, which are kind of standout pieces, and you had to have the laser bear on the front, of course. But yeah, it is really patchy. Some of it looks like sketchy stuff you'd find in your notebook in math class or whatever, where you were just bored and doodling. In some ways, it has that. It has that sketch on your folders, sketch on your workbooks, sort of feel to it. You know, people used to draw like Iron Maiden's Eddie on the front of their maths workbook. You know, in a sense, a lot of it has that kind of feel to it, but it's inconsistent. Yeah, you could make that a real stylistic choice going into the game, and that would be a powerful one. But it's a mixed bag. It could do with a better layout as well. So RPG books are kind of chimeras, really. They're part technical manual, part travelogue, part novel in a lot of ways. But this is very dryly presented, weirdly, for a lot of the breathless enthusiasm and oddness in it. But the layout is very basic, very technical manually. Weird ideas presented in the way you might get a training manual from HR is a little bit jarring in some ways. The wall of text style could do with a bit more breaking up. I understand the reason for Raven's over explanation of everything, and in a lot of ways that's good, but it could also do with some shorter summaries of the rules or some reference sheets for the rules. I mean, it also means that this is a fairly boring page through, as there isn't a lot for you to look at necessarily. So, I mean, I haven't gotten to the third book yet in my flip through, but I'm really at a point where I should and could give the summaries here and the scores. So I think overall I would give it a style score of 2. Alright, now it is very badly presented in almost sort of fanzine quality. That there are moments and the occasional pieces of art that stand out as being much better. The print quality really lets the book down. I don't know who he used for printing, whether it was a local printer or Amazon. I've seen this kind of quality from Amazon, and I've seen this kind of quality from Lightning Source, but that was many years ago, and I understand Lightning Source is better now. But yeah, the print quality really lets it down a lot. It's like it was printed on a home printer with the toner like starting to get low in a lot of ways, which is unfortunate. You know, it makes the flaws even worse, and it makes the standout good parts not look as good as they otherwise could. So yeah, style 2. It's badly presented, but there's this sheer wealth of ideas and oddness and weirdness that elevates the presentation from a 1 to a 2. And it wouldn't take much to elevate the style to a 3 or a 4. You know, some conciseness, brevity being the soul of wit, after all. Some decent stock art, supplemented with the better pieces of custom artwork that are in here. That could easily take it to a 3 or 4. I mean, the ideas are stylish and gonzo, and they're higher in score, but the presentation, which is what style is primarily about, is bad. And so a lot of that is just the print quality isn't there. In terms of substance, it's got to be a 3 or a 4. And this is where style and substance bleed into each other, because it's got a lot. There's an awful lot of content. There's a tremendous amount of ideas and so on involved in the game. It's laboriously explained, which is good when you're trying to learn a game. You got details in this book of monsters and the world ship, and you've got proper maps and descriptions of societies, guilds, and plenty of examples of characters and NPCs, or Fate played characters, as I think they're called in this, because the GM is called Fate in this, which is kind of nice, actually. As far as alternatives to Dungeon Master or Games Master go, being called Fate is quite flattering. I don't mind it. So it's got a lot, but again, the presentation and the organisation lets it down a bit. It's a fever dream. It's an acid trip. It moves from one thing to the other, not necessarily with any logical reason why it moves from one thing to the other necessarily. Though you do get whole sections of things like monsters and so on, many of which could do with better descriptions or art that's missing for those creatures. I mean, some of them you know what they are anyway. A shark. A shark is a shark. You know what a shark is, except when it's a land shark. But yeah, I can't really give it more than a 3 for substance, even though there is an enormous amount here. It is rendered hard to absorb, hard to reference by that disorganized fever dream sort of style in which it's presented. So 2 for style, 3 for substance. That's 5 out of 10, 2.5 out of 5. That suggests that this is average. In terms of value, trying to think about a general audience, maybe, but I don't think that really truly represents what you're getting here necessarily. So it's not, that average score is not reflective of what this is. This is an acid flashback to 70s era gaming with an updated coat of paint and an interesting, uncomplicated system that looks a lot more complicated than it is. This is a time capsule from a time less critical, when anything and everything was on the table and you could succeed with photocopies of a handwritten manuscript. You could publish that, you could sell it at conventions, and you'd do okay because there wasn't necessarily a lot of other stuff around. So this is, even though it's a new edition, it's a kind of historical document, a historical example of what gaming was at the time. Now, I'm often very critical of what I call papal indulgence games. And that's when someone buys a game just because of the person's ethnicity, sexuality, gender, that sort of thing. But I think there's 2 aspects to what makes a papal indulgence game. There is the people buying it for that reason, but there's also the people selling it for that reason. Oh, look at me, I'm XYZ. Buy my thing because I'm XYZ. Raven doesn't do that, but I think this is still kind of a papal indulgence game, because I think it's worth having this in some form, even if you never play it, as a curiosity, as an artifact, as a fly in amber from what gaming used to be, as a kind of cultural touchstone and reference point in the history of gaming. And also because Raven is a great dude with infectious enthusiasm, and he deserves your support on that basis. But there is a playable game here. It just might take you a bit of work to extract it. But Raven is doing what he can still, on top of his very long, very detailed explanations of the rules in the books. He's doing what he can to make it more accessible to people on his YouTube channel, where he explains everything. I may have whittled on just so that I could very rapidly leaf through this last of the 3 books in the core set. So let's recap. Okay, Raven's a good dude. There is a playable game in here, much more playable than earlier editions of Synnibar. There's some interesting ideas, a properly unified mechanic that does work and makes sense once you grasp it. It has presentation and organisation issues, and if you like gonzo games, it's a definite buy. Reading it is a trip, and it's worth buying just to support one of the most enthusiastic and characterful people who's been involved in gaming since nearly the beginning, who has played with a bunch of influential and important people, and who has unfairly been used as a sort of punchline to a joke by the internet for some time. So even though I gave it a deeply average score, that's things that you can look past for various reasons. And I think Raven's been poorly treated by the gaming community in the past. So if you're going to throw money at anybody, he seems like a good guy to do that for. Right. So there we go. Final score was 2.5 out of 5. Average, but worth owning if you're into gonzo, if you're into weirdness, if you want a time capsule from a days gone by of gaming. This is worth picking up. It's worth it as a library item in your personal library and reference. Zang. On a crazy whim, I recorded the almost entire 5th edition D&D SRD as an audiobook, and you can pick that up, pay what you want on DriveThruRPG, or you can listen to it on a playlist on my YouTube channel, Postmortem Video.
Monster misbehaving, planets needing saving, situations graven, I'll form the head. The enemy is clever, we're smaller but whatever. When we put it together, I'll form the head. Y'all can do the treading, swing energy machete. If combination's ready, I'll form the head. I'll form the head. I'll form the head. I'll form.
I can make it happen. I can get you anything you want. You just have to talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. Talk to me. I'm your priest. I'm your shrink. I'm your main connection to the switchboard of swords. I'm the magic man. The Santa Claus of the subconscious. You say it. You even think it. Yeah, I'd have it.